Thank you for joining us for the Bellevue Chamber Business Lunch. I'm John Milbrath, Board Chair of the Bellevue Chamber. I'm glad to have this opportunity for us to gather virtually to hear from a new leader in our community of an essential business. We got a special program today. We're going virtual, and this is the first business lunch that we're able to do this. We're going to have the opportunity to hear from the new CEO of Puget Sound Energy, Mary Kipp. I had an opportunity to meet her a couple of months ago, and again, I think this is going to be a great presentation. So I'd like to start by thanking the Bellevue Chamber lunch sponsors, the Bellevue Collection, Vulcan Real Estate, and AAA Washington. Just Monday of this week at our chamber board meeting, Kemper Freeman brought us up to date on how his 74-year-old Kemper Development Company has kept all of their employees throughout this COVID situation, and Kemper assures us that the buildings, the mall, has never been cleaner. Kemper and his team are working with retailers, restaurants, city, and state to safely reopen the Bellevue Collection in the very near future. And while we've been working from home, Vulcan Real Estate and their construction team are in the midst of changing the Bellevue skyline with a new building or two. And here at AAA Washington, we've had the opportunity to try to let people go virtually around the world with webcasts of cities and countries all over, trying to keep people dreaming, because one day we will all be in the skies and cruises again all over the world to travel. I'd also like to take a minute to thank our lunch sponsors, our lunch leaders, Sweeney Conrad and Clark Newberg. Again, both organizations have been committed to this lunch series and have done a great job getting their employees engaged in all of these fabulous programs. The Chamber's been working really hard to pivot its in-person event production group to all virtual, and that's what you're seeing here today. Again, I have to say these programs have pulled together really important speakers from around the state, as well as topics that I know have benefited many of you. We've had literally hundreds of people on these webcasts throughout the last few weeks and months. If you haven't had a chance to listen to those webcasts, all of those are on the Bellevue Chamber YouTube channel. We've got them all in the library and logged there. So again, you can go back and listen. Really great topics. In addition, the Chamber has a call center that's reaching out now to members and non-members, informing them of business resources that are available. So again, I'd really like to recognize our new members that have joined the Chamber since the last lunch in February. UMA has joined, Heinz, NIHA's Communication, Inland Group, Cafe d'Arte, Bridgman Health Solutions, Amplify Consulting, IO Intelligence, and those are our new members that have joined since our last lunch back in February. So with that, I'd like to introduce Joe Fain, CEO of the Bellevue Chamber. Joe, I will turn it over to you to introduce our speaker. Thanks.
Great. John, thanks so very much. We've been really busy here at the Chamber, working alongside some of our struggling members, participating in regional economic response, and bringing state and local decision makers digitally face-to-face with our business and community members. I'm also pleased to have so many of you joining us remotely today. I was just looking at the numbers. We had well over 400 and some that had registered for today's event, which is just really exciting. We've seen similar numbers at all of our other programs. So we'll keep doing this until you get bored, I guess. So one thing that I wanted to announce today is with the help of our Leadership Conference Committee that has been meeting for months now, we have shifted from our Eastside Leadership Conference, which is typically a one-day seminar. We've shifted over to a 10-week, 1 hour per episode web series, our new Future of Work Leadership Conference. And I'll bring up that slide now. Our new Future of Work Leadership Conference has celebrated speakers presenting on topics from workforce, cyberspace, healthcare, retail, automation, and others. And the weekly series presented by Amazon will kick off June 5th with Amazon's Vice President of People Operations, Ardeen Williams. You can register for an individual program or for the whole series, or as a table captain sponsor right now for additional benefits. Take a look at the program that's popping up on your screen, and hopefully you'll have a moment to register for that here today. And if not, you can go and do so at any time at bellevuechamber.org. Now, the Chamber's annual Young Entrepreneurs Academy is another great program that's kicking off here soon. It's going to be all virtual. This is typically a multi-month course, but this year we're hosting an accelerated 3-week course, providing students grades 6 to 12 an opportunity to develop an idea, create a business plan, and pitch their idea to a virtual panel of esteemed investors. We want to thank Columbia Bank for once again being our legacy partner for this great program, and a big thanks to the Bellevue School District for getting the word out. There are a few spots available, but they are going fast. This is actually an exciting year because we've got over 30 attendees that have signed up, and I believe we even have one that is signed up from Southern California. So now that we've gone virtual, we're expanding outwards. So for more information, click the link on your screen or check it out again at bellevuechamber.org/YEA. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker here today. She has spent her career in executive leadership roles in the energy sector, mostly as CEO of El Paso Electric. She is only 5 months in as CEO of Puget Sound Energy. She's been with us here in Northwest for a little under a year. Luckily, those last 5 months have been pretty uneventful for managing a major utility. Nothing significant going around that requires any quick decision making. But I want to remind everyone that we have time set aside at the end of the program for Q&A. So please use your chat feature, your Q&A feature. Get those questions out there because I know our guest is really excited to answer them. At this time, it's my honor to welcome Puget Sound Energy President and CEO, Mary Kipp. Welcome, Mary.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. And I really am excited to be here. I would be even more excited if, all 400 plus of us were in the same room and getting the opportunity to really interact. And I look forward to those days coming again when the time is right. But for now, I really appreciate this opportunity to interact virtually. And I think it's really important to all of us to keep looking to the future, even as we cope with the current crisis. And I want to thank the Chamber for doing this. This is an amazing opportunity for all of us, but also the events on the young entrepreneurs and the other things that you're doing. Those are so important now. And thank you for doing that for our community and for our businesses in our community. Speaking of that, I could not be happier but to be here in the Pacific Northwest currently. And I've had people ask me, if you would have known when you were being recruited what you know now and what was going to transpire, would you still have come? And the answer is absolutely, and even more so. There is no place that I would rather be making a difference during this pandemic. And I feel like we're very well equipped here to use science and data and to work collaboratively. And I know for a fact that the work we're doing here is benefiting others around the country and the world. So I wanted to share that. And a little bit about me. I grew up on a ranch in southern New Mexico. I was at El Paso and I was not looking for a job. I'd had recruiters call me a few times about jobs, and I always had a list of reasons why I didn't want to go. And this job checked all the boxes. And I'll tell you a few of those boxes. One is a beautiful and vibrant part of the country. And that is absolutely true in this case. I also wanted somewhere that was very focused on renewable energy and decarbonization. And Washington State is certainly, especially with the advent of CETA, been focused on that. And then finally, I wanted a company that wasn't too big and wasn't too small, but was just the right size where I felt like I could actually have input into decisions and yet at the same time make a difference. So all those things came true. It was kind of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And I'm really, really happy to be here. And the community has been so, so welcoming, even during this time of social distancing. So if we can go to slide 2, I wanted to talk a little bit about PSE. I'm sure a lot of you know quite a bit about PSE. We're the state's oldest utility, going back to 1873. We provide energy in neighborhoods and communities across Washington State. We're the state's largest utility, and so we provide lights and heat for more than 1.5 million customers. Of those, about 1.2 million are electric, about 830,000 are gas. I know the math doesn't work on that because some of them actually overlap. And we're headquartered in Bellevue, and we've been here a long time. And despite the fact that our service territory covers about 6,000 square miles, Bellevue is really, really special to all of us at PSE, and it certainly has become so for me during my time here. Our 3,100 employees live and work in their communities across Washington state. And that has been really important during this time because it's given us insight into what our communities are experiencing, and the experiences are not the same everywhere. Obviously, some are more impacted by this, some less, some more dense, some less dense. And so, having employees who are really ambassadors out in these communities and who our customers are their friends and neighbors has been really, really important to us. As many of you know, here on the East Side, we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 5 years to modernize the East Side's grid to help us provide dependable power. We are in the process of building a new substation in Bellevue and also updating about 16 miles of transmission lines within an existing utility corridor that runs from Redmond to Renton. And for shorthand, we call that the Energize East Side project. And I imagine most of you have heard about that sometime over the last few years. And I was really interested to learn when I got here and was learning about the project and some of the controversy surrounding it, quite honestly, that it had been 50 years since our last major upgrade to the backbone of the East Side's electric grid. And all of you know better than I do what's happened to the East Side during that time. Our population has grown eightfold, and our economy, largely to the credit of businesses like yours and smart governmental leaders, has just boomed. And so, whether people are working from offices or people's homes, as we are now, we need reliable power in ways that we didn't 50 years ago. And so Energize East Side is designed to upgrade the grid, keep up with this growth now and also in the future. And we are making progress. It's been slow, but it's coming. And I'm very pleased to say that the Bellevue City Council recently upheld a hearing examiner's decision to approve our conditional use permit for the South Bellevue segment of the line. And the Renton hearing examiner approved our permit for their segment. And in this process, we are extremely grateful for the Chamber's support of Energize Eastside. So thank you to all of you. Your support, along with that of CURE, which is Communities United for Reliable Energy, has really helped give a voice to how critical this project is for the entire East Side, and it will provide a foundation for dependable power. And I have to say that the voice of the community, and especially the business community in this respect, is so critical because so many times as the utility, when we say something, it doesn't carry the weight that it does when all of you say it. So we're very, very appreciative for that. And then, of course, we're continuing to work on neighborhood projects here, such as tree wire to help prevent fires, tree trimming, and of course the self-healing grid, which is part of our grid modernization projects. So let's go to slide 3. Um, I would not be living in the current day if I didn't take a minute to address COVID-19 and kind of its impacts on us. So I had moved here and started my job as president under Kimberly Harris, overlapping with her, which was a phenomenal experience at the end of August of last year. But I had only stepped into the CEO chair on January 2nd. So I was very new to the job when this whole thing hit. And on March 1st, we opened our corporate crisis management team, convened them together. And then on March 4th, we asked employees who could to work from home. So I'm sitting here today on a houseboat in Lake Union on day 78 of working from home. And I have my daughter who's back here finishing up her senior year from college in Massachusetts, living with me again, and my 8th grade son um, doing his online learning, and then 2 big dogs. And I still am holding it together. So I consider that a good sign that I'm going to be able to do so in the future. But what we did by asking our office workers or knowledge workers, if you will, to work from home was a couple of things. What we said is we are coming together by staying apart. And by doing this, we were trying to limit the exposure of our field employees who have to be out in the field to those of us who may be unknowing carriers of the disease. And then we were also heeding recommendations of government officials to do what we could to avoid becoming infected so as to alleviate some of the potential stress on hospitals. So we have limited access to our facilities during this time. I've actually been into the office once during this time and was extremely grateful for that experience. But we're continuing to try to do the right thing here, and we've let our employees know that we will be looking at September 1 as a potential date to begin returning to the office, but we'll be analyzing that based on science and data before we make a final decision. As utilities, we look at ourselves as first responders, and we know we provide a vital service, and that's why we took this early action, is because we also wanted to be there for our customers and our communities. And many of us work at utilities because we know what we do is vital every day, and that's certainly true right now. And we do not believe that anyone should have to go with lights, heat, or hot water during this difficult time. We know that many of our customers and your customers are facing the loss of a paycheck or the inability to keep their businesses open. And so we early on decided to look at what we could do to help our customers who may be struggling financially, or in some cases, maybe to help prevent them from reaching that situation of struggle. So we early announced we won't be disconnecting any customers as long as we're in the process of working to mitigate this virus. We will not have our customers pay interest charges or late fees once the crisis has passed. And with the support of the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, which is our oversight body at the state, we were able to make available $11 million in energy assistance funds to our customers who have been impacted by the coronavirus through a program that we call the Crisis Affected Customer Assistance Program. And we're actually providing, on average, about $100,000 in assistance per weekday. And to date, we've given away over $3 million. So we're really happy to be able to do our part, just like all of you are. And that's one of the things I love about this community in this region is the spirit of coming together. We've also donated more than $1 million through our PSE Foundation, and our employees have raised money for food banks in particular. So we're very, very excited about that. So let's move to slide 4 and talk about the reason I came up here. So I came to Washington State, as I said, because I'm really interested in working on deep decarbonization. In my former job, I'd been able to do a lot with solar because of the solar radiance factor in the Southwest. And we'd been able to get out of coal and do some other exciting things in a cost effective way for our employees. So up here, PSE shares those values, and those are the values of the communities that we serve. And obviously, we have a lot of concern for the environment. And in the midst of COVID-19, we haven't lost sight of that. Certainly, the acute issue we've been dealing with is the impact of COVID-19 on our customers and our communities and our employees. But we've continued to do work to address climate change because, like COVID-19, climate change is a critical issue of our time. And we are in a position working with all of you to do something about it. So we want to do this together. And what's been fascinating for me, I'm a person who always looks for the silver lining. And one positive that I've seen during this terrible crisis is the way that communities, companies, and government have come together to solve this crisis. There's a type of alignment and trust that's been built, even in some cases among businesses that are competitors, to make sure that we work and we do everything we can to achieve this common objective. And so I'm hopeful that we can take the learnings of this and use them to also combat climate change. Like COVID-19, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take science, data, and all these things. So we look forward to working on that for the benefit of our customers. So we've done a lot of work already for the planet and for climate. And recently, for example, we've committed to being net zero methane emissions on our gas distribution system. We're very excited about that. Even prior to this, we were looking at addressing our transportation emissions. And if anything, this crisis has just made that more urgent. And then, as many of you probably know as well, we'll be coal-free by 2025. So very excited about that. And we're transforming the way that we deliver the objectives of the Washington law, which is CETA, or the Clean Energy Transformation Act. So moving to slide 5, let's talk a little bit about that. I imagine most of you know about CETA, so I won't belabor it. But at its core, it commits Washington to an electricity supply free of greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. And there are certain markers along the way that we have to meet. We worked with legislators to craft what we thought was a reasonable policy, as there are very important considerations, in particular, reliability and affordability, that have to be met in addressing this. So we do have off ramps for those in the event that we cannot achieve objectives in a reliable and affordable way. But we're very believe that we'll be able to do so without availing ourselves of those off ramps. So something else that's really important to me, and since I am able to talk to you today, I always feel remiss if I don't raise that, and that's in addition to climate change. One of my other huge objectives as a CEO is I really want to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so many times when we think about DEI, we think about it as pertaining to the workforce, and it certainly does, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But it's particularly important to a utility because we serve every customer, and we want to make sure that we play a role in advancing the benefits of clean energy to every customer, whether they're communities of color, whether they're low income communities. And we want to make sure that in providing this essential need, this energy, we don't discriminate or leave anybody behind. So we're excited about doing this. And PSE has done in its workforce, by the way, a phenomenal job with women. But I also want to continue to do work with people of color and people from diverse backgrounds in making our leadership and all of our employee base more reflective of our communities at large. And so I've prioritized this commitment, starting with my executive team. We have a wonderful new Vice President of Human Resources, Kim Collier, not new to PSE, but new to the executive team. And she shares my passion, and she's charged with ensuring that PSE has an inclusive and diverse workforce who can meet the needs of all of our customers. So, final slide. I just want to thank you again for your support and for being really terrific neighbors, and for what you've done to really create one of the most phenomenally vibrant communities in the country, if not the world. When I hear about what Bellevue was, 10 or 20 years ago, and I see what it is today, it's really been just phenomenal, phenomenal work. And like I said, I feel really fortunate to be living in this region right now. And I think that we have a really strong foundation here in Washington. We have some of the most innovative companies in the world. So we're leading through this crisis, as I said, and I think we can lead on climate change as well. And I also wanted to say that the work of Challenge Seattle during this time, of which I've been fortunate to be a part, has been not only impactful but inspiring. And so I really appreciate the values that group reflects, and it's the values of our community. So I look forward to working with you all. I look forward to healthier times for businesses. I look forward to watching you innovate through this crisis. And as I said before, I really look forward to meeting all of you in person. And thank you again for this opportunity and for your time. And I'm happy to take questions.
Push the button. Hope I showed up there. Thanks so much, Mary, and thanks for taking this time to be with us today. It's, we're trying to find every way under the sun to continue to connect our area's business leaders and community leaders with one another and with the public. And your willingness to take time today is really appreciated. And we do have a ton of questions that have come in, and certainly welcome to entertain some more. So use that chat or Q&A feature on your screen and help send some questions in to our CEO, Mary Kipp. But first, to help us out, a celebrated executive in her own right, I want to welcome Mutual Materials CEO and Bellevue Chamber board member, Kendall Anderegg, to help moderate our Q&A time. Thanks, Kendall.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction, Joe. And Mary, thank you so much for your presentation. I'll offer my own personal welcome to the Pacific Northwest. It's great to have your experience here leading Puget Sound Energy in general, and of course, specifically during this really challenging time. I appreciated your remarks when you spoke to your COVID-19 response. I guess I would follow up with that to ask if there's been unique challenges you think that you have had. And also just, we're all having to continue to adapt as new guidance comes down on the federal, state, and local level. How are you continuing to adapt to that as new guidance comes through?
So we've made a decision early on to be very conservative in our approach to this, meaning we're going to take the disease very seriously. We're going to listen to science and data, and we want to try to create a consistent experience for both our employees and our customers. So, for example, when we decided to ask people to work from home on March 4th, quite frankly, I think some of the employees thought I might be losing my mind at the time. It seemed like a little bit like an overstep. But we knew based on what we heard from some of the government officials and some of the other companies in the region, and particularly those who have had experience abroad, and particularly in China, in the case of Microsoft and Starbucks, what was likely to be coming our way. And so we continue to do that. In setting the September 1st date for us to look at having our office workers go back, one of the things that we tried to look at was to give a planning horizon to employees. As a single parent myself, I know the difficulties of planning for childcare, and now especially in an environment where childcare doesn't exist in many cases, we wanted to make sure that we gave the certainty and the ability to our working parents to be home, and also those who may be caring for someone who's immune compromised or who may have, elderly relatives they're caring for. So we didn't give a hard date that we'll be going back on September 1 because we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. But rather, what we said is we will reassess closer to that time what our plan is. And so we're trying to keep a forward trajectory on a return to normal. I imagine, though, that we'll see subsequent waves, and some of us may have to take steps back. But the key during this to me is being transparent and being honest. And our employees, like I think everyone's employees, want to hear the facts. They want to hear what we know. They want to hear what our expectations are. And they also want to know how we're going to take care of them. So early on, we also said we are not going to lay anyone off if it's at all possible for us. And so even some of our workers who are field workers and weren't doing the customer facing work that they typically do, because we were limiting it to essential work, we paid them and they stayed home. And what was fascinating to me during that is how many of them who could have sat and done nothing instead started working on safety campaigns or started working on ways to make jobs more efficient. And it's really created kind of coming together. So when you say, how are we managing this? We're being fluid, we're being honest, we're being transparent, we're trying to live by our values. And actually, I'm going to take out trying. We are living by our values. And so we make sure that we do what's right, we have your back, and everyone has a voice. And that applies to both our customers and our employees. But the other part of this that I think is really important too is even though so much of our time is spent on this COVID response, we're also keeping forward looking. Like I talked about on climate change, it's really important that people have hope for the future during this time and that we continue to work on things that are going to be here with us long after COVID is gone. So I also want to make sure that we innovate and that we learn from COVID and that we don't just assume that the business we go back to is the business we were in before. Hopefully, it will be better and more innovative and better for our customers.
No, I appreciate that, and I think you're absolutely right. Flexibility and communication to employees and customers is the key, and how we stay ahead of this, not just this challenge, but honestly, all challenges, right? Had another question, which I think is unique to this time and, potentially could impact, the future also. So questions about the grid and how things are being impacted as we've seen the transition, right, from people working in their offices to at-home work, and how has that been impacted? Has that, have you guys seen that change, and how are you reacting to that?
Sure. So I'll take it more broadly, and then I'll go to the grid. Interestingly, I think like many employers on this call, we've actually seen productivity of our office workers go up while they're working at home. And I think I'd seen studies on that in the past, but of course, it's hard to believe that's actually the case until you see it. So we've seen that happen. As far as our folks out in the field, they are heroes, in my opinion. They have been able to maintain system reliability. They have been able to work in new ways where they can't work in pairs, for example, one person in a truck. They're even now going back into customers' homes, our gas employees in particular. And they've had to actually throughout for emergent situations. So they had to wear full PPE, talk to our customers about social distancing, and many times during conditions that were potentially hazardous because a lot of the work that's done has to do with gas smells and gas leaks. And so they've done a really phenomenal job during that time. Um, it's, I think too, they're looking at ways to plan for the fall. We've actually looked at exercises. We look at our utility brethren in the Southeast, for example, and they're going through hurricane season while dealing with COVID. We're fortunate that our key storm season isn't now, but if indeed there are going to be additional waves in the fall or winter, when we're having storm season, we want to make sure that we have plans in place to make sure that we can keep safe and reliable power during that time. And we've actually done that planning as well.
That's great, thank you. Question around the wholesale energy pipeline and how that's changed since COVID. Have sources of energy changed, and are any of those changes expected to be permanent?
So as far as our energy mix, and we actually have less hydro than many others up here, but our energy mix remained pretty consistent. We've been fortunate because the the protocols we put in place to maintain social distancing and PPE and things for our folks working in our generation facilities so far has kept people safe. So we haven't had any of the tragic outbreaks like we've heard about on the Navajo Nation in New Mexico and Arizona with the workers at the coal plant there. So our energy mix has been pretty consistent. But throughout this time, we've continued to work on procuring new renewable and clean sources of energy. We recently announced an RNG contract with Clickitat. Did I say that right? I hope I did. And we've also been working to find, additional biomass projects, wind projects, solar projects, whatever the case may be. And, we're continually looking at ways to consider deploying batteries on our system as well, and some transmission solutions as well. So like I said, we have people who are really continuing to move ahead during this. And so we're not changing our current energy mix so much, except in the small ways I talked about, but we're certainly working to change our future energy mix.
And that actually leads into another question that was asking specifically about battery and solar and looking at those newer technologies in the future. Can you expand on that a little bit and talk a little bit more about how you're looking forward around those new technologies?
Yeah. So in my prior job, we did a request for proposals, which yielded some solar paired with batteries. So I'm a believer in batteries. They can be an expensive solution, so you need to make sure that they're used appropriately. But we've recently seen two very large utilities announce large scale, in terms of hundreds of megawatts, battery projects. And to me, this is the beginning really of having batteries available on a broader commercial scale to support the grid. And so I plan to watch that very closely along with my teams who look at these things. And I think we'll be seeing some batteries deployed in the near future. We do have a couple of battery projects. One is at our Polsbo Service Center, and that is where we're using ourselves as a bit of a guinea pig to see how a large commercial customer would utilize a battery system. So we're learning from it, and it's had some terrific learnings. And then another one is up in Glacier, which is a small community. I'm sure many of you know, at the end of a very long radial line, so it doesn't have loop feed. And they had experienced some pretty tough reliability issues, lots of snow, lots of trees, very difficult place to get to, in the middle of winter when events tend to happen. And so we have a battery in there as well. But I definitely think that batteries are part of the solution as we move ahead. And I'm looking to learning more about deploying them up here, both for individual customers and on a grid-wide basis.
Great. Can you talk a little bit more about your recent partnership with Republic Services and renewable gas?
Yeah, and I'm not terribly familiar with this project, but I think you're talking about our procurement of renewable natural gas. That's actually one of the things that we've been really, really laser focused on, because renewable natural gas currently to me has two really great uses. One is we can use it to power plants, and then two is we can blend it into our natural gas distribution system to help alleviate some climate change associated with that. So we are certainly looking at additional sources of renewable natural gas. Very frankly, they tend to be limited. And so we're trying to find ways to really maybe access landfills where there isn't a pipeline infrastructure in place to deliver that natural gas. And we're trying to find companies who may want to partner with us on those innovations. We're excited about the future of renewable natural gas. And then another one related to that is renewable hydrogen. It's in its early phases. Europe's a little bit further along than we are on this, but we really believe, and we're actually part of a consortium that's working on this. We really believe that creating hydrogen from renewable energy may also help us to create a less intensive carbon system, both on natural gas fired generation and on end-use natural gas for our customers.
That's great. So, I think there's a question also around, broad terms, how are you planning on achieving, the goal of electricity supply free of greenhouse gas emissions by 2045? I will say, when you were talking about clean energy, I loved hearing about the diversity, equity, and inclusion component of that. I loved hearing about your comments around, not just workplace, because I think all of us focus on that, as we should, of course, but also customers. So I very much appreciated that response. But if you can kind of talk more about that goal and how you're kind of, achieving that metric.
So it's really an all of the above approach. If you talk to utilities across the country, and many of us have similar renewable goals currently, although Washington, I would say, is on the leading edge. There are about 5 of us who are the leaders. We feel like we can get about 80% of the way there on existing technology, but we're not sure that we can get 100% of the way there on existing technology in a cost-effective way. And cost-effective is very important, and it's going to be even more important, I think, as we're coming out of this recession that was created by this crisis. So some of the things that we're looking at are really creating new energy efficiency opportunities, doing some customer dedicated projects with customers who may be interested in it, and then really making our distribution grid smarter overall. There's demand response that we can use there, and all of these things are designed to really lower the usage side of the equation when we look at having to work across the entire system. On the other side, we're looking at ways to procure, source, build, and deliver more clean and renewable energy. And now part of that, we're exiting coal. I think most of you know that I mentioned it earlier, but we are part of the coal strip plant in Montana. And we also are part of the Centralia coal plant, which we actually took over as part of an effort to help the Centralia coal plant close. But we will be coal free in 2025. And right now we're actively procuring energy to replace those. One of the things that I've learned here too is when we sit on the east side of the Cascades, this is not a renewable rich zone. The really rich renewable zone in terms of wind and solar tends to sit on the other side of the Cascades. And we all know that up here in the Pacific Northwest, trees are almost as sacred as they are in the desert where I'm from. So we don't want to cut down any trees that we don't have to. That said, in order to bring some of this energy across to the population centers here in the eastern side of the state, we're going to have to find ways to build a green renewable transmission corridor. And that's going to be part of the long-term fix. That's going to be part of that 20%. How do we get there? But certainly using every technology at our disposal, whether it's batteries, whether it's supporting customer rooftop solar, which we have a ton of in the Southwest, whether it is large scale wind, large scale solar, hydro. The state seems to be maxed out on the amount of hydro, but finding ways to make sure that that's deployed most efficiently, and also finding ways to take advantage of kind of differentials in time using markets, and also differentials in resources, because it may be when some of the solar in the Southwest isn't needed there, it's certainly needed up here in the winter. And so I think there's all kinds of innovative ways to do this. I think once again, when it takes all of us, that means all of us across the region and the country. And I think those of us across the Western states will certainly be working more together to make sure that we can provide the cleanest, most affordable power to all of our customers.
Appreciate that. I'll say you're doing a great job pronouncing our local names. I know we probably need to provide a primer to kind of everyone coming into this region.
We do.
It's funny, kind of growing up in the region, I don't think about the challenges of the names. They're just natural to me, but I know kind of coming in, it's definitely different.
I definitely have empathy for people in the Southwest who can't say Spanish names, which I'm very good at, having grown up in the Southwest. And I would laugh at their pronunciations, and now I can't do that anymore.
So coming from El Paso, I guess I would ask, what do you think has been helpful to you, kind of coming from in terms of transferable learnings versus, kind of new to our region, outside of kind of the name pronunciation, but what do you feel has transferred well, and what is it just kind of new challenges based on, this region, this customer base, your workforce here? Across the board.
So kind of interesting in the Western grid, which comprises most of the United States. El Paso sat at the southeast corner of that grid. PSE sits at the northwest corner of that grid. So I've now been at two utilities kind of at the end of the road. And in terms of delivery of power, that makes a big difference in how you look at it when you're not so networked and have transmission constraints. So running two utilities like that is certainly translated. Another thing that's certainly translated is caring about all our customers' equity and the environment. At El Paso, it's a relatively low income area. We actually had a 10,000 square mile service territory, but most of that was desert, had the cities of El Paso and Las Cruces, but very low income area, 87% Mexican American, many, many new immigrants who struggle not only with language, but also in terms of their own financial well being. And so part of what is in my DNA is trying to make sure that we take care of all of those people. And that is something that, is very precious to me at El Paso. And similarly here, we have communities that may need a little bit more of a helping hand, whether it's in terms of approaching them in their own language, whether it's in terms of assistance on the financial front. But caring about our communities in a real and meaningful way is something that translated as well. Now, something that's entirely different, and it's not necessarily the Pacific Northwest, but it is PSE, is PSE is also a natural gas distribution utility. And while I worked for a national pipeline company early in my career, I've never worked in natural gas distribution. So learning about that has really been interesting for me. And then the other thing is, we're winter peaking up here, which means most of our energy usage is in the winter. Of course, in southern New Mexico, West Texas, it's summer, so that's a little bit different. But overall, the commitment to our employees, our customers in our region is something that's very, very similar, and quite frankly, one of the things that drew me up here.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. You talked about this region and the growth, and I think we all see that on the east side and, Bellevue particularly. So with the addition of all the large buildings and the growth that we're seeing, how's that impacting your future needs? I know, of course, you spoke to the work that you're doing, but just kind of in that broad scale, looking out over the next 50 years, how do you feel that impacts your needs?
So certainly, it's going to mean that we have to do things better, smarter, more efficiently, right? Because we're going to need additional energy. We're going to probably expect, especially if some companies continue to have people work at home into the future, which is something that's been talked about. We're going to have to make sure that our reliability is probably even better than it's been in the past. So we're going to have to innovate. And that is, to me, the most exciting thing about this industry right now. For so many years, we did things exactly the same way. For over 100 years, we made power at central sources, moved it across large wires, stepped it down at transformers, and then distributed it. Well, now we're seeing the prosumer, we're seeing two-way flows of power, we're seeing customers express an interest in green power or extreme levels of reliability, or a combo of these things. So we're going to have to think differently than we ever thought before. And to me, what's going to be required in this, and this is something that I look for in hiring people, is humility. And we are going to have to say, as the utility and as employees of the utility, we do not have all the answers. So let's partner with you. Let's partner with you as our customer. What are your ideas? What are your wants? And let's figure out how to solve this thing all together.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the opportunity to do this Q&A with me, and I can send you over that pronunciation primer if you'd like.
The one I really need help on is Puyallup. I can never say it, no matter how many times I try.
That's a tough one.
Puyallup.
I think everyone struggles with that one.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Kendall, it was so nice to meet you, and thank you to you and the
Nice to
chamber
meet
and
you,
everyone.
too.
It's lovely to be here. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Kendall, and thank you, Mary, for that great conversation, and Mary, for your great presentation today. Your organization has certainly been at the forefront of what's keeping our economy going as we've shifted from the at-work environment to the at-home environment, but also the organization and its employees have been so incredibly committed to our community and the giving to our nonprofits, and the employees working overtime to help keep our community strong. We're just very grateful to you and Puget Sound Energy for all the work that you do. I'm excited to talk about our next Bellevue Chamber lunch, which of course will still be a webcast, and it'll be on July 23rd. Brent Beardall, who's the CEO of Washington Federal, will provide a mid-year economic update. Brent presented last year to a sellout crowd at the Westin, and that's when the economy was rosy. So, register online, and I'm sure that we can bust some of those attendance numbers through the roof as we look at the economy as we're coming hopefully out of the COVID situation. Would also like to be sure that you register to join us all Friday mornings beginning June 5th at 8 a.m. for the 2020 Leadership Conference. Again, that registration is available at bellevuechamber.org or online here. It's going to be a great program. We're putting up all of the speakers and all of the information here over the weekend, but it's a great time to reserve your seat right now here before the program here ends today. Now, we have a great opportunity to do a little raffle. We've got Geico, who's generously provided us with some swag and some movie tickets and some candy. And I'm sure you can enjoy the swag and the candy right now, and hopefully the movie tickets soon enough. So I'm going to just push the lucky draw number here and select a winner. And it looks like Chelsea H is our winner. And so we will go ahead and get that information off to her. She's logged on here and we've got her email address. And so we'll send it over. Finally, I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank our sponsors. Thank our guests, and especially Mary Kipp for Puget Sound Energy. You can find all of our upcoming webcasts as well as our previous programs on demand at bellevuechamber.org or at the conclusion of our program. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, and we hope to see you at the 2020 Leadership Conference Series beginning on Friday, June 5th at 8 a.m. Thanks.